Hi, I'm Karen Golden-Arante here at the Cohasset Historical Society with Edward Mulvey. Hello Ed, how are you today?
Good, thank you.
Excellent. So today we're going to talk about Ed's life here in Cohasset, who's a lifelong resident, born here at the Cohasset Hospital, which was at the corner of Ripley Road and North Main Street, or Social Sawyer Street. So that was in
1935.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, so now your dad was born here as well, and your grandfather was here. He came here from County Cork, Ireland. He was on the
You mean my great-grandfather.
great-grandfather, right, I'm sorry. So he was on the 1850 register. So you've got a pretty long line of Mulveys here in Cohasset. So when you were, you grew up in Pond Street, and Pond Street was your neighborhood, and you went to school at the Cohasset schools. Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood growing up?
On Pond Street?
Well, in Cohasset in general, Pond Street, Cohasset, what you did.
Well, it wasn't, there weren't a lot of kids my own age. There were 28, I think, graduated from high school. So, playing in groups or having, a lot of friends your own age and your own neighborhood was not easy, and parents didn't have automobiles that could drive you to some other section of town, so you rode your bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, I grew up, I skated and played baseball.
All the fun things.
Yeah.
So now you went to the original Ripley Road School is what it was called, which is now our present day Osgood School, but it was the Ripley Road School where you went for your first through sixth grade?
Sixth grade, kindergarten through sixth.
Yeah. And is that where you picked up the trombone, or was it later?
No, later.
Okay. I just wanted to throw that in here.
It's now the library.
Oh yes, it is now the library, yes. And then from there you went to what's considered the old Osgood School, which was where the police station was.
Yes.
Is, right? But you didn't stay at this point. This was torn down, so you were able to move into the new high school in 1951.
Yes.
So, and we'll show everybody pictures of all these schools as they existed then. So I have your 1953 yearbook here, showing 28 kids graduating. That's like, wow, that's not much. But we have you're lovely, you were the vice president of your class. I'm telling you things you know already. And you're on the football team, number 13, and you were in basketball, quite active, and you played the trombone.
Played baseball too.
Yeah. Oh, you did? I missed
but
that.
I don't think it's in
Oh, okay.
it's printed.
So now what prompted you to pick up on the trombone? I was curious, because there was a band picture of you here.
Well, mother was a musician, and she said to my sister, who was the secretary to the superintendent, get him, see Mr. Chamberlain and have him pick out an instrument for him. So you had no choice. You just did it, and they bought a trombone, and I started playing it. And he played in the band, and I used to do solos at Parent Teachers Association meetings. And then when I went to Boston College, I played in the band there for 4 years.
Wow. Now, were you able to take the bus to all the schools?
I walked most of the time.
To all the schools that you went to?
Yeah, I'd have to walk, I think maybe the first, second, third grade, it would go up Pond Street, but I think by the time the fourth grade, I could walk down to South Main Street maybe and get a bus that way.
So you'd walk over to the Osgood School as well, and then up to the high school when that came to be.
Yeah, I walked always to the high school, always to the high school here too.
Yeah. So you were telling me that, now, what business was your father in?
Well, he was originally in the leather business. He started there when he was 16 years old. Went to Boston, worked for Captain Leather Company in the wool and leather district down near the South Station.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked there till 1938. And he got on the board of directors at the Pilgrim Cooperative Bank in 1936, and when the man retired or resigned who was running the bank at the time, they offered my father the position, and he took it. So he started there in 1938 and worked till 1968.
Wow. So now you had also were talking about walking to church in Hingham.
Not me.
I know, but he
My
was
parents.
talking about, yeah. So that was quite a walk to get to church,
Right.
because there was no Catholic church in Cohasset at the time.
Right.
And so they would walk to church. How many miles do you think that was?
Oh, 5 miles, I guess. 5 miles back.
Wow. Wow. And therefore your grandparents must have walked as well to church?
I'm sure they did, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they were able. I mean, if you were 80, you didn't walk.
Yeah. So you went off to BC after graduating,
Yeah.
and what did you major in?
Business.
Yeah.
I was a marketing major.
And then, so when what was your goal when you graduated? What area of
The
business?
United States Army.
Oh,
You know, I was ROTC,
yeah.
so I was commissioned as a second lieutenant. And I went to school in El Paso, Texas, for 80 aircraft. And at the time, they were downsizing the Army, and they were asking people if they wanted to serve out their time or did you want to get through. And so I said, I don't want to serve out my time if it's possible. So I get out early and went to work at Pilgrim Cooperative Bank.
So, as far as the banks in Cohasset, we had, in 1845, there was the Cohasset Bank. And then in 1915, we had the Rockland Trust Bank. But in 1916 is when the Pilgrim Bank started. And that originally was in the Little Red Schoolhouse, which was up there, up at the top, where St. Anthony's is, St. Stephen's is.
Right.
Can you tell us about the beginning history of the Pilgrim Bank?
Well, it was started by citizens in the town. They applied for a charter from the state for a cooperative bank, and they were granted the charter, and it started in May 1916. Next year will be its 100th anniversary. And the first president was Edward Wilcott, and his brother Joseph was the vice president. And they had a list of people who were board of directors. They all served with no pay, and they all contributed a certain amount of money for the capital to run the bank and to lend out money until deposits became large enough that they could get paid back, and they got paid no interest for that deposit.
Wow. But in the beginning, the bank was only open one day a month
Right.
at the Little Red Schoolhouse.
Yes. And then that proved to be, a detriment to the bank, and also the location of the Grand Army, the Republic Hall. So they rented space on top of Dolores Drugstore. The building burned down in approximately 1960, but they had moved out. They moved out because they were on the second floor, and the customers were having difficulty climbing the stairs. So maybe late 1920s, they moved into 48 South Main Street, which they occupied up until a few years ago.
Mhm. And we have some great photographs of the bank at that time. And your father's car is parked out front, is that what yours? So, and great photographs of your happy birthday, Ed, and Ed. So these are great to see. But so this renovation that took place in the 70s was to renovate this existing Pilgrim Bank, not this latest one, but to renovate the Pilgrim Bank that was built in the 60s. Is that?
Well, they bought the building. The building was owned by McGaw's, who owned the hardware store, and he left most of his assets to Helen Collier. And as she got older, she came to actually my father and said, you know, I'd like to sell the bank. Would you people be interested in purchasing it? And what she meant was the bank quarters plus Campbell's jewelry store, which is a great portion of those pictures, and the old First National, which was a nationwide store, now it's Chinesky's.
Mm.
So they hemmed and hawed and eventually bought it in the late 1960s for $39,000 for the three of them.
Wow.
And when I could remember Helen coming into the bank and yelling into me, "You know what the price was on this?" I said, "I think it's $39,000." They never signed a purchase and sale.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what they. So we bought the building, and we didn't need the space then. But as time went on, we needed more space, and the Campbells were getting older. So they said that at the end of 1975 they were going to retire. 1974, and so January of '75 we knocked down the front of both buildings and joined them, knocked the interior wall, and gutted the whole thing, and we went into a trailer, which was out back of the bank. It was a regular office trailer set up for banks with all the alarm systems and telecommunication systems and stuff like that. So that was for January, February, March, April, and then we sat there because there was a truck strike, and they couldn't get the carpeting up from Georgia, and so we sat there for 3 weeks in this little trailer while they waited to put the carpet down. Finally that came and we could move in. So it was good, and it worked out well because the bank started to grow. We had more visibility.
Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to talk about, now when did you, one of the other areas that you're involved in very much is elders in town and in the state as well. Could you explain how you got involved with that?
Well, my father died and my mother lived at home with me, and the only senior group in town was called the 60 Plus Club, and they met once a month at the Unitarian Parish House, and I think they had a dinner and a meeting, and that was the only thing really available to elders. So then the state got involved and started a rule that every town should have an office for elder services. So they opened one, and it was in the community center, and it's still there, partially.
Yes, it's in transition.
In transition. So I always wanted to get on the board because I just figured that I knew what it was like for her being alone so much, and she stopped driving, and you know, it was tough. So the biggest thing for elderly people is transportation, and even though they might drive, they may not want to drive to Quincy to a doctor's appointment or anything like that. So I really I asked a friend of mine who was a selectman so I could get on the board of directors. And, oh, yeah. He never did it. So when Mary Jane MacArthur became a select person, I asked her in 2 weeks. I got a letter that I had been accepted by the selectmen. And so I started going to meetings. And it was very interesting. Kathy Bryington was the director. And she got through in 2002 or something like that. And I stayed on that board until 1995. It just got so busy that I couldn't devote the 3 hours on Monday for it. So I resigned, but said when I retired I would come back, which I did, and stayed on it till last October.
Yeah.
So, and I enjoyed it, and I think I contributed some, and I also decided they didn't have anybody at South Shore Services, no representative from Cohasset. So I volunteered to do that and was appointed. And then Kathy and Anna got together and decided they wanted somebody else. So I ended up taking my lookings, but I just went there and said to the man, I want to be on this board, and they took me on. And I've been on there ever since, 10 years. So I was president of that board for 4 years.
Wow.
And the other ones, if you need services, you can go down to Cohasset or other services and explain what's the matter, or you could for your mother or something like that. That's a lot of referrals come from children. And then they would get evaluation from South Shore Services. And if they said that, you know, you need somebody to help clean the house, and they would, and you were income eligible, they would get somebody to come and clean your house. Or, you know, you have the senior shuttle here, and you have, you know, the senior rides up to 15 miles for medical appointments and things like that. And then if you had to go to Boston, there's another federal program for that. So it pretty much takes care of everything, and it also has a component of protective services, which is something that is really getting busy and always is much over the budget that the state grants money to South Shore Services. South Shore Services is a non-profit corporation that was created by the state of Massachusetts. There's 27 of them, and they're funded through state and federal monies. And now, because of mass health and things like that, people can afford, elderly people can afford to have private
Pay.
Insurance. So they get clients that can pay for it. So it's good, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it very much.
Well, when they started at the Unitarian Church to meet, the 60 Plus Club, there were 690 Cohasset citizens that fit that bill. Today, there's almost 2,000. So that's a big increase, and the need for the Wilcott Commons Senior Center is really quite evident. Certainly, you know, you see that in your participation and my participation as well. But it's interesting because the Wilcott name is a name that you brought up with the bank, and it's also a name now of Wilcott Common, and it's a name we don't necessarily hear around town, but the Wilcotts were a very prominent, visible family in Cohasset from 1717, so they were around for many, many years. Mary Wilcott Hooper had left in her will for funds to the Social Service League for these funds to go towards old age home, hence Wilcott Commons, to be named after her father, who was Levi Wilcott. So just in case people want to know where Willcutt came from, that was very interesting. And the Willcutt family actually lived on Summer Street, at 63 Summer Street, which is a big home there that has recently been torn down or rebuilt. Beautiful home. One of the things that I found very fascinating in looking into your family was we were talking about, and I've talked about this with Pat McCarthy, we're talking about the Pond Street area, which was town land, where the almshouse was built, and the Pond Street Cemetery and the Popper Field. The original poorhouse, as it was called, was at 119 King Street, which is kind of where near Sunrise is now. But they actually, for need in the town, built that home from 1816 on 3A was pretty dilapidated after a while. The town kept getting complaints by the state. So they built this ginormous almshouse for housing of the poor. And those poor were not just elderly, they were all ages. It could have been Mr. and Mrs. Smith with their 4 children, or Widow Jones with her 3 boys or something. So it was quite elaborate, this. And in the town report, every year, it shows there is one separate department called Overseers of the Poor. So this, you opened up a whole can of worms that I have been researching this. And in the process of researching this, I found deeds of purchase of at Pond Street Cemetery of William, who's your grandfather, and Patrick, we thought maybe it was a cousin of William perhaps, but certainly, I mean, they were contiguous, so my feeling was that they were related somehow. But even on the old maps of Cohasset, Pond Street Cemetery is right there. And there were dozens, I mean, lots of people buried up there where the high school is presently. And they did, in the process of excavating for the high school, did come across a few remnants of the cemetery, but I'm not sure if they got all, what might have been 80 to 100 people were buried up there. But we're gonna leave that up to somebody else to figure out those details. Another thing that you brought to my attention, which I had no clue about, was, I mean, we knew speakeasies were here in Cohasset, but a member of your family was involved with a particular one at 260 Forest Avenue, which was the address, called Bread and Cheese. I thought it was bread and cheese, but it's bread and cheese. So we have a photograph of this restaurant, which was also known as a speakeasy. It was actually a postcard here. And so that was like the only restaurant over in that area then. So that was another interesting find of the Mulvey family. So very interesting. You've opened up a whole can of worms, Ed. Thank you. So I have to tell you that it's always a joy to see you on Monday mornings at the Senior Cafe at Willcutt Common. You are a phenomenal treat to be around, and you're a big help to us. So thank you. Out loud, I'm letting everybody know that you volunteer an awful lot at the Senior Center, and we appreciate all your help. And it's been really fun to listen to your story about Ed Mulvey and Cohasset growing up, and here we are together again.
Thank you.
Thank you.